Alrighty. Alright, what's going on, guys? My name is Educated, AKA I Can't Spell, AKA Paulo. We have been live with you, along with my amazing partner and co-host, Kieran, also known as Dark Jolteon, for 22 hours and 10 minutes at this point. And as you all know, Thursday is our regular podcast episode day of Across the Pond, which, if you don't know, there's plenty of information to be found on our channel around the area. Today we are joined by a very special guest, a good friend of ours that we've known for almost 2.5 years at this point. He was an incredible theorist for CallOfDutyZombies.com, and he has since moved on to an aspiring career as a politician while he is a student at university, none other than Bradley, also formerly known as Tactical Insertion. So what's going on, Brad?
How you guys doing? Glad to be here. Thank you.
Not bad. You know, we're tired, exhausted, but
Yeah, I'm sure.
we're ready to rumble.
I'm sure. All right. I guess one thing. I guess I'll start it off with a couple stories that I've got. So it was my 8th grade year, and my parent. It was the Great Recession had just happened, and stock markets had crashed, and everyone was losing their money. And so my parents, we had a house in Arizona and a vacation house in Nebraska. And my parents were gonna have to sell our Arizona home. We were gonna have to move. I was just going into high school. It was a scary experience. And so they asked me, do you want to move now, or do you want to move a little bit later, right before high school? So I said I'd move in between 8th grade between first and second semester, and so I moved to Nebraska, and it was a completely different experience. I have 60 kids in my class currently, or in my high school class, compared to 450 in Arizona. So it was kind of, everyone knows each other. They know everything about each other. And it was just kind of a shock, and I think in small towns especially, there's kind of the idea of the popularity is much more prevalent. And as a new kid, I wasn't very popular, and so when I got here, and it was first couple years of high school were definitely it was pretty hard. Got called names a lot. Just I don't know, it was a sad time. I went to a therapist, and they treated me as depressed, and I had to take some medication for a while, and then I started to kind of find my footing, and things got better, and I don't know, I guess life moved on. And then I remember my best friend from middle school called me in my sophomore, going into junior year, and he was just bawling his eyes out on the phone. And he called me, and he said that he found his uncle, who was his closest person he's ever known. His grandparents, weren't there for him. His parents weren't there for him. And he found his uncle lying dead on his apartment floor.
Oh my God.
Drank himself to death, basically, and so that was hard, just because to this day he's still my best friend, and I don't know, it was just kind of one of those things where when that happened to him, I could feel his pain, and so I tried to offer him therapy, just kind of, just like, this worked for me, I think, you should do it, and I think he took the advice, and I hope it helped him out. But I don't know, I guess it was just kind of the thing where life goes on, and things got better, and it was hard because I posted this on CODs a couple of weeks ago. One of my good friends from high school, I had lunch with him pretty often. I had a lot of classes with him. Here in Nebraska, got in a car accident and died. So I had to go to his funeral a couple weeks ago, and it's pretty, I don't know, it was heartbreaking. It's kind of the idea that, you never know. You never know what's gonna happen. You just gotta hope, that life goes on. And but it was just, I don't know. Life will throw you for some twists and turns, I guess, is the moral of everything that I've learned over the last couple of years. We just gotta kind of take the punches and roll with it. But I don't know. That's kind of what I've got right now. It's just kind of everyone has a story, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so what do you like? What do you think when you're like rolling with the punches and you're trying to kind of get through each and every day? Just because, like you said, life's full of twists and turns, and you learn to deal with the punches. Like, when is it okay for you or for anyone to just kind of sit back and realize that there is a lot of bad stuff going on, and that the life you have, as great as it may be, the sadness you feel is something that you can't control. Like, when is it okay to accept that? When are we allowed in society to just kind of accept the fact that the state of depression isn't really just kind of a prolonged sadness. It's really an ailment. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people don't take that time, don't think it's acceptable. I mean, what about you when you were dealing with that? Like, were you able to take the time to realize that, like, I am sick, I'm not just messed up in the head? Like, did you have that time?
Right. It was hard, because I feel like when a person is depressed, I feel like you spend a lot of time just thinking. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's, for me at least, that's all I ever did was just I sat down and I thought. I would try to think things through as logically as I could, but for me at least, it was just emotional roller coaster. At some point you might be feeling good, and then just down you go. But I think, I don't know, it took me a while to realize that it wasn't permanent. It I don't know, it was hard. I tried to do everything that I could to try and get rid of it. Found a new group of friends. I would sit there and Google search, how to beat this or how to fix that or something like that. Just trying to figure out all the different methods I could use to, just get out of depression. But I don't know if that really answered your question.
No, it does. And I'm sure Kieran has his own way. Like you said, I mean, everyone goes through things, and I'm sure everyone deals with it in their own ways.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very much a case by case basis. So I've known people that have gone through stuff like that prefer sort of shouting it out to the world, whereas with me, I prefer sort of keeping it in. And there are people that I know that like to sort of just pass it off as a joke, like pretend it wasn't there, and people that would basically keep it bottled up inside until everything eventually exploded. Like, everyone takes something like that differently, and it's got to be taken on a case by case basis, and that's something that doesn't seem to be done nowadays. Now, you say you got help, you to go and see someone, and I guess I mean, I assume that they helped you in some way, that they did help you get past, to an extent, what you were going through.
Yeah, it was a combination, I think, of a lot of things. It was they gave me a lot of books to read. That was one of them. I still have them on my dresser. They gave me a lot of books to read. I'd go to the sessions, and they'd try and find the core of the problem, and I think it was a combination of their help and just kind of growing up and maturity. I think I think what happened was I don't know. I heard so many different people talk about different life experiences that they had, and I think it kind of came together with me that I mean, some of the things that have happened are it sucks and it's unfortunate, but I don't know. I feel like I kind of realized that I think it could have been a lot worse. I don't know if that make sense, but I tried to pull myself out of it the best that I could.
I mean, Kieran, with you.
Yeah, just sort of. No, you go. You go.
No, I was just saying with you, how was it?
Yeah. Yeah, with me, I mean, I didn't really go and see anyone about it, so it was sort of a little bit different with me. But honestly, it's just a case of to try and link it back in an extent to sort of what we've been doing today with this whole live stream. Something that I've read about the charity that we've been raising money for, Young Minds, is that they're trying to sort of like the money that will be used to help people, rather than understand what it is or why it is they're going through what they are. It's helping them find the best way for them to deal with what it is, and I think that's something that is very much sort of left on the back burner. It's always a case of why is this happening,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what is causing it or whatever. It's never a case of what can be done for you as an individual to you know, help you. Because when I was in sort of the worst of my times in school, and me and a friend of mine, we were going and seeing sort of the in-school counselor sort of person like every day, and basically she would treat the two of us like exactly the same person. Like it was always the same answers to the same problems, and we couldn't be any different. Like honestly, we couldn't have, like, we need a completely different sort of I guess treatment would be the best way of putting it. And it's just, it really baffles me how in a school, someone who's supposed to be dealing with perhaps the most mentally fragile people of anyone in the entire school can't understand that each person is different. That really blew my mind at the time, and it still does today, that stuff like that is going on. And I'm aware that the person is still actually working at the school, and this is 3-4 years down the line. So I guess it worries me in a way.
It's kind of one of those things where I think like my experiences compared to like my friend whose uncle drank himself to death. It's like if we were to go in and to seek treatment or something like that, I guess same thing that you're talking about. I don't know, they're two completely different experiences, so you have to play off of it instead of just assume that everyone's the same, because you can't.
It's weird because a lot of people today want to see depression treated as a disease, kind of like AIDS or influenza or scarlet fever or something like that. And usually those patients have a list of symptoms and you prescribe the same treatments to them. But the thing about depression that is so unique, it's just, it can't, like, it's a disease the same way that HIV and AIDS is, but it's different in the way that it affects the mind primarily. That the human mind is such a complex and an intricate thing that you can't prescribe just one medication, that you can't prescribe a list of medications. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. And I hate to be so cynical about the world, but there's so many problems that could be fixed if there was an infinite supply of resources in terms of just like time and people willing to help others and take that one-on-one treatment, because that's what it takes. I mean, if you look at people all over the world who have become great friends because either they're both depressed or they're both struggling with something and they come together, that's that kind of one-on-one environment, and that takes months, years. And I guess people really don't see depression as something that should be treated like that. And I guess that's what we're trying to do on this stream, and I think that's what Young Minds tries to do in terms of educating people, having that parent hotline where parents can call just to find out about what their child may be suffering, what may be the possible list of dozens of things that they could be thinking.
Right. Because that's the one thing, it seems, to kind of go back to your earlier point, there is no cookie cutter method for this. I don't know, you can't treat it that way. Everyone else, everyone has different experiences, so it affects them differently, and just naturally everyone's different to begin with. So I don't know, I mean, it's the same thing of something I heard a while back about like mental health hospitals and stuff like that. I was reading that they were baffled for a while at why certain things weren't working. They just kind of, like certain medications or certain things that they were trying to do, and it just kind of played into the idea that just like I don't know what we've been talking about. Everyone's so different to begin with. You'll never find somebody exactly like you physically or mentally.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really want to sort of, I guess, advertise about the charity we've been working with is sort of a new campaign that they launched the same day that I got in contact with them to sort of get their get the linkage between this stream and the charity themselves. And it's this amazing campaign. It's basically a website, and people who are suffering with whatever mental illness, whether it's sort of anxiety, depression, or whatever. Obviously, if there's prescribed medication, a lot of the times for young people, they'll be told you must take, these pills this many times a day. You must do it because the doctor says so. But they never have any idea what these pills are going to be doing, why they're going to be taking them, or anything like that. And what this new website does is it has information on every single sort of, not even just commonly used medications, but all the known used medications, I guess, for a lot of the mental health illnesses. And it's something that basically is meaning that rather than having to rely on, the older generation, the adult generation, that a lot of the time seems to be letting younger people down, especially when it comes to mental health, they can go out, they can find out for themselves, and they can actually teach themselves what it is that they are sort of suffering from, why they need to take what medication they do. And it's something that I think is it's freaking awesome, to be honest. Like, so many people just have to take medication as if just because it's doctor's orders, and now they can finally use this website to find out why it is they're taking what they're taking, what it is that they're sort of suffering from. And it's just sort of, it's a great step forward. And I think that's something that really sort of depicts why we chose the charity we did, why we got involved with Young Minds in the first place, because they are taking huge steps to make a big difference, and something that both me and Paolo have a lot of close links to, and something that both of us feel we can really sort of get behind and support. And that's why we chose the charity, I guess, which I don't think we've really spoken about before.
Not really. It's kind of been hinted at, but it's never been really explicitly stated. So I guess now it's out of the bag.
Yeah.
But I guess kind of in regards to depression, I'm sure there are plenty of ways that people deal with it. And I know that I can't remember how many books I've read or heard about where someone suffering from depression turns to something spiritual. Maybe not exactly religious. I know this is a very controversial topic, but it's not exactly something religious, but something spiritual, something of a higher calling that gives them hope, that gives them promise of the future. And in addition to all of the treatments or the therapy that they may have, this kind of one thing is a motivator, and it's uplifting. And I know that, Bradley, you were talking about something in philosophy that you had been discussing with regards to religion. Is there any kind of tie to that between, how people may use religion as this kind of not something to worship, but something to hope towards, to believe that there's something greater out there, that maybe all of the shitty things in someone's life can eventually turn around?
I think that it's one of those things that I think I think we all have certain kind of innate fears, like no matter how much we'll say it, someone might say, oh, I'm not afraid of, of death, or I'm not afraid of, of this or of that or something like that. I think that, I think innately we all kind of are. And I think that's where religion really comes into play. As far as, I think it helps. I think religion is very, very helpful in letting people cope with their fears. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I don't know. I think with depression, I personally was very fearful that I would yeah, at the beginning, at the lowest part, I was kind of afraid that I would never, that it just, wouldn't go away and it was just going to kind of continue. Um, and I think that for some people, religion is very helpful because I think, do whatever that you believe will help you get through it, if that, um, whether that's religion or something else, um, then so be it. In philosophy class, we haven't really talked about any kind of, I guess, connections between the two, but I think the lines can definitely be drawn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's turning to religion is definitely a very effective way because I've heard a lot of stories about people who do it, and I think do whatever you think that'll help you get through the situation.
I think that on the topic of religion and how it can act as almost a guide for people that are going through difficult things like that. Now, it's no secret I'm not religious at all. Like I don't follow any particular religion, and honestly, when I sort of see the idea that religious sort of teachings are helping people through stuff like that, you'd think, not being a religious person, I know it is like this for a lot of people, that it should sort of annoy me that they're almost pushing their ways onto this vulnerable person. But honestly, in my opinion, it's helping them, and if they find happiness, comfort, peace, whatever in whatever these teachings are, then that is great for them, because honestly, no matter what my personal beliefs are and what I think is or is not correct, I guess, if it's helping them, then that's all the better for them, and so it's all the better for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, I grew up. My grandparents are all very religious people, and my parents are, I guess, semi-religious. They believe in a higher being, but they don't really kind of like express it or bring it out very often. I was religious when I was younger, but when I got to about middle school, I kind of, I guess, maybe not middle school, about 14, I started to kind of question it, and right now, at this point in my life, I'm agnostic. I don't have any religious affiliation. But just agreeing with you, I think whatever just whatever helps them. This isn't about my beliefs, or this isn't about how I feel about the situation. It's their outlook on life, and if having a religion helps them, then I think they go for it.
I actually kind of tie this into a point that MWA 2012 made in our chat. I don't know if you saw this, Kieran, but he said that he knows a person who takes depression pills. He knows a person who takes depression pills for every single upsetting thing she has in her life, and he's not against taking medication, but I think there is a lot of abuse in younger generations of basically people who they get prescribed this medicine and suddenly they take it all the time because it dulls the pain, and instead of kind of facing the reality, these people, you hear stories about it all the time on TV, books, and movies. These people who abuse this kind of stuff and end up accidentally killing themselves. And MWA 2012 also says that our mind is a very powerful thing, and with some help, it can overcome everything. And that's the same kind of vein with, some kind of belief system, whatever you believe in, whatever you call your God, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, whether it's a set of books, or whether it's a belief in God Himself. The power of the mind, along with the help that should be prescribed, can really just overcome anything. And I think that it would be you would be hard pressed to find people who would disagree that your outlook on everything, regardless of what it may be, has the biggest of impacts on your success in defeating depression. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah, I always, I mean, you always hear the, I guess just to kind of go along with that, you always hear the phrases, you have to, um, just kind of, I guess, one that my mom always told me was, think happy to be happy.
Hmm.
Just kind of, and then I guess, the cliche, the mind over matter and just kind of stuff like that. But, it's cliche for a reason. It has legitimacy.
Kieran, do you have anything on this? I mean, just in terms of, I mean, obviously you know it very well, and
Yeah, and I know someone who did take the medication, and I know someone who refused it. And to put it into perspective, the person who didn't take the medication is now at university and is living a fairly happy life, and the person that did ended up committing suicide in March 2012. So maybe that's just a one-off scenario, but to me, I feel like in some cases the medication could be so extreme that it can drive people even further over the edge than they would have been had they not been taking it in the first place. And it's just something that isn't really, I guess society in a way looks at it as they're getting medication, so they're getting help, so things should get better, rather than what is this medication going to do to this person? What effect could it have on what is a young person's mind? I mean, I go back to young people again because obviously it's what we've been doing with this stream, and obviously it sort of ties back to the new project they've done. And this is not me coming out and saying I'm completely against medication and stuff like that. But what I am saying is we need to pay more attention to what we are giving to people, because I saw the person that commits suicides, it drove them mad having to sort of deal with all this crap that was being thrust upon them by their docs. So they didn't understand why, they didn't like what it did to them, and eventually it drove them further over the edge than it would have done if they hadn't taken it in the first place. And I just think it's something that needs to be, I guess, moderated a bit more, for lack of a better term.
I think that I think that's a lot to do with just kind of a lack of education as well, which I think is what's so great about that website that you were talking about, is now, the kids will be able to, see exactly what they'll be taking, what it's going to do to them. So if their doctors don't tell them for, whatever reason or however that, shakes out in the situation, now they'll be able to see, what's happening, which is I think it's a really, really good thing.
Knowledge is power. I'm a firm believer in that, and I feel like the more you know about what's hurting you, the better chance you stand at beating it, at overcoming it. I feel like it's almost kind of like this thing where, because depression is such a mental disease, that people somehow think that, kind of giving it softly to the people who have depression will kind of lessen their pain, but in reality they're just kind of hiding the truth that, instead of telling someone you are extremely sick, you have an illness, but it can be cured, they just kind of skirt around the issue and say that you have this disorder, that you may have certain anxiety attacks, that you may be, prone to this and that, and they prescribe them some medication. It all kind of shuffles off. I feel like, again, it ties back to this whole idea of honesty, and with young minds, again, we really like the fact that it is all about education of mental health, and of just a really transparent kind of treatment for depressed people, or people who really don't understand depression.
Mm-hmm. I think playing into that, the education factor is, I think society as a whole is starting to change its views on depression as well. I know, like, personally, kind of around the area that I was at during my time, it was kind of viewed as, like, if you had depression, I almost compare it to when someone claimed that they had, PTSD or something after a war. Everyone just kind of shook it off, and it was just kind of like maybe they didn't think you were being serious, or they just didn't really think that that was that much of a problem. But I think that people are starting to get educated now and realize that it is something that needs to be looked into further. And so I think kind of the social stigma of it's changing too, which will really help.
I mean, a point Way brings up MWA 2012. He talks about how today's, basically kids our age, they spend so many hours on the TV and the computer and just a sensory overload in terms of social media and everything, and they're just not listening to their parents. They don't have a good relationship with their family. And I know that isn't like this for the people I surround myself with, but I'm just wondering, like, how do you think that plays into the social anxiety, the depression, when these kids are out there in the real world and they encounter the first thing that isn't like their virtual world? Like how, I don't know, how does that, is that a direct cause of depression in today's society, or is it something that is just a one-off, just a random side effect?
So is depression kind of a, for someone who spends so much time on a computer or around electronics, once they go out into the real world, if it starts to affect them?
Like from a very young age, like my cousin is only 7 years younger than I am, but he had an iPad at like age 8, and he has all of these gadgets and stuff that he can use, and I didn't have any of that stuff until I was at least 13 or 14.
I think I definitely think that there's I guess kind of like a secondary effect of it. I think that I've always kind of been a promoter of the idea that, like some people complain that technology is kind of ruining society and, things like that. I think that there's always going to be something, I mean, before it was MTV, and then before that, it was, when newspapers came out, everyone was on their newspapers. Now they're reading newspapers. Now they're, I guess, on their iPads. But I think that for people who are always on, I guess, on electronic devices, I can see the correlation between them doing that, and then it kind of blossoms into them not being as social, which then, can lead to them being, for some people, they get depressed if they're not. I've heard of people who get depressed if they're not, all that popular in school. You know what I mean? They're not talked to. They don't have a lot of friends, and then, depression, kind of takes over from there. But I think that it plays into it, but personally, I don't think it's as big as something else, like just your family upbringing in general. I think has a very large impact on it.
I had to, in a sense, disagree with what we had to say, and I think something that I personally, this has come from personal experience, would want to add in is that at the moment there isn't enough education in school about things like mental health, so that people sort of know, like, obviously you can't predict if someone's going to be hit with depression or anxiety or something, but people don't know what to look for. And honestly, I've learned more about sort of mental health illnesses and such from what I've seen online and what I've seen on TV than I was ever taught in school, because it's just not taught whatsoever, pretty much. And I think, to an extent, obviously, misrepresentation in TV, movies, and online and stuff, which does happen a lot. Stuff like that is incredibly damaging, and that's sort of part of a reason that people are so uneducated, I guess, on the situation. But the other reason is the fact that we're not taking the time to educate people in the truth. And it's something that I can't remember who it was, but it was a celebrity in Britain who was campaigning for, because obviously schools are, it's mandatory for schools to teach sexual education. So, and what the celebrity was pushing to do was to try and make it so, rather than just teaching about sexual health, also teaching about mental health. And I think that is something that really does need to be dealt with, I guess. It's something that I would be 100% advocate of, because I think that not enough people know what mental health really is. And even I was, when I was at a young age, when I was 10, 11, 12, I thought mental health was a genuine mental defect, like you were crazy or something. You had to be locked up, stuff like that, because I just wasn't taught anything. And then the only reason I do understand and know as much as I do now is because obviously I've been through it myself. I've had friends that have gone through it, and I've sort of done a lot of research on stuff like this. And I guess to sort of counter what Wei has to say, I think, yes, obviously TV and internet does have an adverse effect on the understanding on whether or not someone is at risk of becoming depressed or whatever, but I also think it's also a big help in the opposite way, in that they might, learn something about it, and therefore know, if they do become depressed for whatever reason, they might know how to get help easier. They might know what they can do to help themselves and such. And I think honestly, I think that the main fault isn't with the parents, isn't with the person suffering, isn't with the media, the TV, internet and stuff. It's with the education system. And that's something I've always sort of stood behind, that nothing is done in schools. I mean, I don't know what it's like over in America. I'm talking from a British perspective, I guess.
There's nothing here like that.
I just think it's ridiculous. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous how something that is, I mean, it's a fact that the leading cause of death for males under the age of 30 is suicide, due to things like depression and anxiety and mental health. And how can we ignore the fact that, well, that is the case, when all we have to do is begin to educate people in schools from a young age? I mean, we could start fairly young. I mean, I'm not obviously saying we start teaching 2, 3, 4-year-olds about mental health, but if you to start teaching them at a young age, sort of what the sort of things that people can go through, why they go through them, what exactly it could mean, then perhaps we can make it so that there isn't so much of a taboo behind the whole case. And I did sort of a mini sort of short documentary as part of a college course, and I focused quite heavily on the fact that people don't seem to understand what depression is. And 2 of the people I interviewed were sort of the people that I didn't really have any contact with depression, and I asked them why they think people get depressed, and it was a good 5-10 minutes before they could come up with a conclusive answer. And the conclusive answer was just, it could be anything.
Someone made a
the
point.
Fact that it,
okay, keep going. I have something to say after this stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to close it off and say the fact that it took 2 people who were both, I think one was 17, one was 18, so practically adults, and it took them 10 minutes to realize and come to the understanding that actually it could be anything. It's not just that someone, something snaps in their brain. It's not just that, they get bullied, or it's not just that they have no friends or whatever. It can be literally anything. And I think it's a really big sort of statement that even adults don't seem to understand what is really going on in what is the biggest killer in males under 30.
Someone mentioned personal upbringing, and I know, like, obviously the depression affects everyone, but I think they were kind of focusing on the part where, there are kids who are born into good lives, and their parents aren't, they aren't very strict. They don't teach them, the results of their actions. There's no, you do this, there are consequences. It's kind of like one of those things where, obviously things are going to happen in life, and there are always going to be bad things, and you're always going to get sad or upset at any given point in time. But it's what you do in reaction to those things that really makes you who you are. I mean, Toasty said something about he and his friend are going through basically a very similar situation, just something crappy that's happening in their lives, nothing too major if I'm interpreting that right. And Toasty, just because of the way he's been raised, the way his parents have like grounded him in morals, that if you do certain things you will be punished, you will not get the privileges that our life has affords you. And then his other friend is basically not parented well at all, and he is turned to drugs, and that leads into cutting and depression. On the other side, you have a bad event that happens, and it's like, well, obviously there are people, no matter what happens, who are always going to be afflicted with depression, but there's also that group of people who, based on the way that their parents say, like, okay, this happened in your life, this is really bad, but here's what you can do, here's what you should do, and these are the results of the choices that you will make. And as opposed to a family who really doesn't do any of that, and you end up with these kind of two diverging paths. And I feel like I can't help but think that it is personal upbringing, that your parents are your first and foremost educators. You're pointing towards the education system, and of course education starts when you get to school, but education really begins the first minute you come out of the womb, and that's straight from your parents. So I feel like there is that link there.
I definitely think so. I think, I guess one thing, my mom, she worked for the Human Health Services, for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years. So basically she would go around to our town, and basically all of the troubled families in the town that were having issues, whether it be, it could be something like a domestic violence, or, drug usage, or just, like kids who are in bad situations. She would go around, she would take the kids under her wings basically and try and help the parents out to kind of, this is, just kind of basically watch over the families, and try and help them just become closer and just kind of become better parents and stuff like that. One thing, I've always been a very big advocate of a person being able to, I guess, pull themselves up from their bootstraps. You know what I mean? But with that, I don't think it really can't be denied that kids in those situations, I feel like they go through, I feel like they go through a lot more hardships than a lot of other people do, I guess. I mean, they've, one of the families, there's, I don't know, they could have 4 kids and only be making $15,000 a year. And I can't personally imagine the psychological, you know what I mean, and the mental, just how that would affect them. But I don't know. I just think it has a lot to do with, I guess, kind of tied in with my original point. I think a lot of it has to do with your upbringing and just kind of the things that you went through as a kid. And like Paolo said, just kind of, I guess, the things that were instilled to you by your parents from the beginning. One thing, I have a question for Kieran, though. So I completely agree with your point on that depression could be caused by anything, and that there needs to be a higher education. People need to be more educated on it. I'm just curious. One thing that I can't figure out, I guess, would be, what do you think the best way to educate them on that would be, when it could be anything?
I think more of the best way you can educate someone on this sort of thing is, rather than teaching them to sort of spot why they might be feeling that way, just show them how to spot signs that they are in general. And obviously it's difficult, and I realize that, but we can't sort of turn away from something as big as this because it's difficult. And I think it's a really difficult one, and I mean, what would you do? Well, I come up with an answer, because
it's hard. I guess I can understand where you're coming from, as far as trying to study, why they have it is one thing, but at the same time they have it and it needs to be dealt with, I guess. So I think, I don't know, I almost wonder if you gave about as good an answer as you can get, as far as teaching them that they, the signs of having it, as opposed to I don't know why they might get it, but I think that I don't I don't know.
I think the main thing we need to educate, rather than showing people how to act when they find someone, or if they find themselves in that position, is more of educate people that it's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that
Right.
is really like you know, because as it stands at the moment, a lot of people, when they find themselves suffering with depression or anxiety, they start to think like, well, the first things that twigs in their head is, I'm going crazy. Am I
Yeah.
going to get locked up? What's going to happen to
Right.
me if I come out to these people and tell them exactly how I'm feeling
What's
and
everyone
stuff like
gonna
that?
think?
And exactly, and we need to. That's the main thing. We need to sort of get out there, rather than educating people on what to do in that situation. More about educating them that they don't have to be ashamed if they're in that situation. They don't have to hide the fact that they're in that situation, because it's one of the most common things that there is, for especially for teenagers. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's something like one in 3 teenagers will suffer from some sort of mental health illness
Mhm.
during puberty, and like, how can we not be educating people who 1 in 3 people will deal with it, and yet
Right.
we're teaching them about, and I wish I could say that this wasn't something that came up in my old school, but it did, teaching people how to deal with something if they find that they become pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
obviously yes, obviously teenage pregnancy is something that has been growing a lot recently, but
No pun intended.
since when was since when was the idea of teenage pregnancy more important than the idea of people potentially taking their own lives and living a life that is, I guess, below par, below what you would expect of a human quality of life?
Right.
Why would we educate that over what is potentially life and death?
And on top of that, even, I think, I don't know the exact number on this, but I'd put money on this that just that more people, like what with your 1 in 3 number that are teenagers who are going, who are more likely to be, deal with something like depression. That number is, like I said, I put money on that. I would put money on that number is higher than the number of teenagers who are going to get pregnant.
Mhm.
The likelihood of
without
that.
Oh, definitely.
So why, why wouldn't you educate that? I got educated in 5th grade on sexual education. This is what you do. This is a condom. And then, Paolo knows this. I don't know. I think I told you. I put it on cards at least. My senior year, my ex-girlfriend that I was with at the time, she got pregnant. And it's like, if I got educated on that, I agree with you completely on, why wouldn't we be educating kids on something that's far more likely to happen to them?
Yeah, and I don't want it to sort of be misinterpreted. I'm not saying we shouldn't be educating people on that sort of stuff. I'm
It's just-
saying,
No, I agree.
sort of,
It's just so prevalent.
It's
It feels like it's so
yeah.
easy to talk about that as opposed to mental health.
Right.
Because like when it comes to
So-
teen pregnancy, it's always just about choices. Whereas when you tackle depression, it feels like it's too complex for people to handle.
The thing is, you can never educate some people enough that you will deter them from making that sort of life choice. There are people that will be deterred by what they get taught in schools, but there are some people out there that just will never be deterred, no matter what they're taught in school, about, being safe in whatever situation, whether it's, I don't know, criminal stuff, whether it's practicing safe sex, things like that. Like, there are some people that just won't respond to that sort of education, but it just baffles me that sort of thing is educated so heavily, and it's extremely heavily. Like, so much is put into that sort of thing, and yet nothing is put into the idea of mental health.
Well, on that other note,
Wait.
Party Rock says something. Sorry, Brad. Perhaps you can add on to
No, you're good.
But someone in our chat, Party Rock, he adds that teen pregnancy is just easier to market if you look at something like MTV.
Well, an interesting statistic actually came out, and I actually had to look this up and make sure it wasn't absolute bullshit. But from what I could find, it is actually true that since MTV started showing 16 and pregnant on
Yeah,
their
it's true.
channel, the teen pregnancy rates have actually dropped.
It's true.
So, in a way, and I hate to say this because I think the show is garbage, and I think MTV is garbage, but MTV, in a way, are educating people enough to deter them away from it, I guess. And
Wow.
I just thought it was really interesting
Yeah.
that MTV is cashing in on stupid teenagers that
And they're saving
They're
kids
saving
from
other
the life
stupid
of,
teenagers.
yeah,
Yeah.
but at the same time they're saving others, and I think it's just a really sort of
ironic.
interesting formula. I mean, MTV will cash in on anything, but
At least
honestly,
they're doing some
I
good.
think it's just, yeah, I guess so. I guess I mean, maybe it's wrong for me to be surprised that MTV are actually doing some good, but yeah, I am a little bit.
That's funny. No, yeah, I had read about that before. I had saw something on Twitter, and they're just like teen pregnancy rates are dropping, and I was absolutely baffled because it seems like the one thing that we hear about nowadays is just obesity, are the two ones. And I was surprised to see that one of them at least was dropping, but it's kind of I guess one thing I wanted to touch on was the social idea of just kind of the social taboo of depression and teen pregnancy is, I don't know, this is my own personal opinion, but I would almost argue that that our generation is more or less almost going through like a sex revolution. I think it's becoming a lot more socially acceptable to wear certain things, and a lot more than a decade ago. Which I think, I don't know, just kind of play into the idea that socially, one is a lot more acceptable than the other.
I think we can all agree there is nothing more, I guess, disturbing than seeing some of the outfits that you see sort of like 11, 12-year-old girls walking around in. It's like...
It's bad.
And the way you could just look at them and just... You just think you look like a child prostitute right now. And that's supposed to be... And that's marketed. Like, that is advertised. Like, people want children to dress like that. And I mean, I personally think it's disgusting.
Yeah,
but,
it is. It's like, and it's the whole thing too that leads into the idea of like, oh, there's so much blame the victim. The whole blame the victim mentality. People blame it so much on the women or on the guys for just pressuring the women, but in general it's just media itself, society itself pressures girls and young ladies to just dress a certain way or act a certain way that it almost kind of breeds sexual misconduct. There's no other way to say it, and it isn't.
It's almost like asking for it.
Exactly, and so I don't want to get like it's not the victims. I don't think it is the victim's fault in that sense, but they are just a product of what society has fed them for years. And it's not even just a conscious thing. Like, if you continually look at the same thing day after day, day after day after day after day, it just turns into this. It just turns into a part of you, and it becomes what you see as beautiful, what you see as the ideal of perfection, and you can't get rid of that.
Something. I was gonna say, if you say something to yourself enough, eventually you'll believe it.
Exactly. I don't know. It's kind of disgusting, or it's very disgusting.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of seems. It seems like it's kind of something that happens every, like every 40 years. We'll get a sexual revolution. We had one in the 20s. We had one in the 60s. And I guess kind of now we're here. But one thing, I don't know. I think there's not enough going into the the mental health system, I guess, kind of like switching facets is, in the '60s there was a large push for revitalizing and changing like mental hospitals and facilities and things like that, and it never really came to fruition. But I'll come down to Denver, Colorado, and I'll walk down 16th Street Mall, and there'll be a homeless person, and sleeping in every place they can find. And if you look at it, most homeless people are mentally unstable, and I think that also needs to be something that needs to be changed. It's just the mental facilities in general. I don't know, just get some of the homeless people off the street and help them. Something that I've believed in, I guess.
And in terms of just the social topic, I know that earlier today you were talking to us about something to do with wages based on gender. This is kind of really tying into the whole like media pressure, society pressure on females versus males, and the whole that whole discussion.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the media affects it. The idea of society, I think, is an interesting one, because us three we make up part of society, and we have different views than society. So it's interesting to see how society's views changes, while you'll meet so many people that are against that idea, but they'll just conform to it because it's what society. I don't know. I don't really know where I'm getting with this. I just think that the idea of society is so weird, because I feel like there's so many people that disagree with it, but they'll just follow it because the media portrays it as that's what society believes. I don't know. Media's got a weird effect on people.
It's a strange one, because in some aspects, obviously there's reportedly, I mean, I'm not sure just how deep this actually goes, but reportedly there is a big almost war between getting equality between women and men, and obviously I'm all for that. I'm all for having gender equality and such, but I honestly feel like the media's twisted it in such a way that we're getting
absolutely
extremists in a way. It's getting to such an extent where we're having people coming up with absolute bullshit stories and stuff like that to try and, in a way, and it's come from both sides, both male and female, and I'm not going to single out either, just to sort of, in a way, get dominance.
Right.
And it's just, this is the 21st century. How can we still be in a situation where we're fighting over who should be more dominant? Like, we're all human beings. We're all equal in this world. We were all born into the same, universe. Why can we not just get the fuck along?
Right. I've done a lot of research for a couple of my classes as far as on gender and race roles, I guess. And I was listening to it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast between the International Monetary Fund, the head of that, it's a woman. The head is a woman, and she was talking about wage gaps and something like that. And she was just like, if you really look at it, women hold, she goes, if you look at it, women hold less paying jobs. And then the guy says to her, he goes, but if a man said that would be sexist. And she goes, absolutely. And it's just, it's interesting to me, because I think that a lot of people would like to throw the race card or the sexist card. And I think it's, a lot of extremists, but I don't know. It's interesting. Former President Jimmy Carter, he said a couple weeks ago that the wage gap between a man and a woman who are both working full-time doing the same work is that women would earn 23% less than a man. And I looked it up, and it's just it baffles me how even the former president of the United States can construe information so incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I looked at everything and they're both working full time, but you're not accounting because they're working full time. That basically means that they're working hourly, not based on a salary. So that means that they get overtime, and that figure of 23% doesn't account for their hourly. How much they're getting paid, B, how many hours they're working, what title they hold, their education, their age. Just like and once you add all of that together, it drops from like 23% to 3%. And it just, I don't know. Just kind of, it always frustrates me when, I will agree that there's a gender wage gap.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
It's just,
Definitely,
it's just not as
pronounced,
prominent as, as people are, everyone likes to source certain numbers because it's either the lowest or the largest, and I don't know, there's always a middle.
Yeah, the true number is always in the middle somehow.
Right.
It's like, I don't know. It's just been, I don't know. I think the whole like male versus female wage gaps, obviously, I think that everyone can agree that it should be somewhat equal. It should be more equal. But obviously, there are jobs that men do, and inevitably they will just make more than females no matter what. And like in the same position, I mean, obviously, I'm not entirely sure how these statistics are made, but if you take a look at a major sport like basketball, for example. I mean, you have, the star men's basketball player, LeBron James, is making, nearly $30 million a year, where you have, I don't even know who this, the best women's basketball player in the world is at this point, because it's not as popular for whatever reason. And it just isn't like this like sexist thing where like these hyper feminists have to go around and like shoving their white picket fences and like burning down like gyms because they're like shrines to masculinity and testosterone. It's not like, it's not fair to compare that, because obviously society has made it so that one is far more popular than the other, and as it stands, like both are doing very well for themselves. Like the professional women's basketball and professional men's basketball are two of probably the dream jobs for so many kids out there. And it's not fair to kind of minimalize that and use it as a statistic to try and gain jobs for, say, people who actually need it. Say a waiter who makes like 40 cents an hour more than a waitress. It's that that's the kind of stuff we need to be focusing on, not using these like overblown statistics. It's like, the difference between 16 million a year and 20 million a year.
Exactly, and not to mention half of. So WNBA players are paid less because less people watch their games,
obviously,
less people go to them. But if you, I could take the lowest paid WNBA player and add up the salaries of all of my professors, and it wouldn't hit half of that. And it's like, it's also one of those things where it's like, I think, professors need to be paid more, and but it's like, you're making less, but you're still making damn good.
I mean, without wanting to go too far into the whole, sports players get paid far too much in comparison to what they do. I just think it's ridiculous that some jobs even have gender stereotypes in them, such as obviously with something such as
like
a
plumber
nurse
or nurse
or a plumber. So you're about the chance of you finding a male nurse are very low, and I think it's honestly a case that it's become sort of like a socially unacceptable thing to do. And it sort of works in multiple different ways, and it's ridiculous how we can have certain job roles dominated by a certain sex just because that's what society thinks is socially acceptable. Like, I mean, I always hate the whole socially acceptable argument. I think it's absolute crap. If you want to do something, you go out there and you do it.
Right.
Don't let gender stereotypes hold you back from doing whatever it is job you want to do, whether it is something like a nurse, whether it is, I don't know, a builder, or
And that's
obviously
yeah, that's just kind of the idea of the gender roles that society has built for everybody. I don't. I mean, I think that women are. Let me figure out how to phrase this. I think that women have. Okay, so you know how like most women they do interior design perhaps, or they do nursing. I think that more women have the eye for that, not because women in general have an eye for that, because society told them they have an eye for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Exactly.
a man is equally as capable of having an eye for it, and they do. They're just told that that's just not what you do. It's not, there isn't something that's wired into their brain that makes it so that they are less capable. They just don't.
Exactly, and to bring it back to the sort of internet TV point that Wayne made earlier, but sort of link it in with another topic. In this instance, I'd actually agree with it, and I think it is things like TV shows and films that, to take the nurse example again, a TV show such as Scrubs, which is a comedy TV show,
Mm-hmm.
it's not supposed to have any particular sort of hidden meanings behind anything, and you'll notice that in all the episodes, 99% of the nurses are female, and there is an entire sort of series of episodes, I think during season 2, where there's a whole big thing about there being a male nurse, and it's just, don't get me wrong, I love the show, but stuff like that it's done in an innocent fashion, because it's just copying what is sort of true in real life society, but until either real life society or the media starts changing this whole idea of gender stereotypes, we're just going to sort of keep them, and it's like we're not going to get rid of them unless someone begins to give. So we need
Right.
sort of the media to do it first, because it's obviously we're not going to wake up one day and the whole universe is going to go, nope, no more gender stereotypes, that's gone. It's
Right.
just not going to happen. So we need to start sort of stopping TV shows and movies and whatever from, in a way, sort of implanting in the brains of young people what sort of lifestyle they should lead, and start showing them that they can lead whatever life they want as long as it makes them happy and doesn't hurt anyone else, I guess.
And I guess
One thing that go for it.
okay, the one thing I was just gonna say is that another thing that I was just thinking about, it's like when you have these like like the whole thing with like nurses being primarily female, it's also just one of those things where it's kind of like a scientific predisposition to just taking care of people. As a woman, as a female human being, a Homo sapien, you are pre-inclined to or inclined to just take care of other people, and I think that's why they end up being very commonly babysitters or nurses and stuff like that. I just think it there is that scientific aspect to it as well, that it's not like totally just society's fault.
Yeah.
Obviously,
yeah.
One thing, I got into an argument with a kid this morning about, we're talking about the quote-unquote unequal representation of women in politics. And, he said to me, he goes, if you look at it, only X percent of female politicians are females, and I think the number, I might be botching this, but I think it was somewhere around 7. And then we kind of got into a debate about it, and I said, that isn't because they're less capable, that's because they're not running. Because if you look at the races between a male and a female, it's about 50-50 on who wins. And it was just kind of, that reminded me of just somebody who's kind of, throwing the, throwing the card, if you will. This is, because of, because of society or something like that. And I think it's just because the women are just now starting to break out of their gender role.
It's definitely a tough thing, and I think it comes full circle with what you were talking about earlier. Just the whole fact that we are kind of expected to do things in this world just based on even our gender, our upbringing, where we were born, who our parents are. We're expected to do things right off the bat, and it's like we're kind of living in this mold, and that anytime we try and break out of the mold, it's uncomfortable because we've just been forced into it by whatever or whoever, and somewhere along the line that discomfort is going to lead you to make lots of life altering choices, and just that discomfort in general could lead to something like depression, because when you aren't yourself, when you want to break out of that mold but you can't because it's too rigid, because it's too tough, that's something that is going to eat inside you, because if you can't break out, it's all going to go within you, and you're going to end up being an unhappy person, and not just an unhappy person, but a depressed person, because even though your life on the outside seems so great, it's all coming within you because you're not being the person who you really want to be. And I think it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah, you're putting on the smile and just bearing with it, and everyone just kind of thinks that you're all right. But yeah, I don't know. That gender role it's one of those things where, like, I know I personally have been trying to, I mean, I think all of us are always on the lookout for, for love. I just kind of like switch it real good, just touch on it. But one thing that always bugs me is, I'll be spending time with someone, and they'll do something that they'll say they're not good at this, or not good at that, or they shouldn't have to do this or shouldn't have to do that. I always just kind of look at them. I'm like, why shouldn't you have to do this or do that? I guess it's one of them is, my brother always talks about it, is about like men paying for meals and stuff like that. That's one he's upset with. I don't really mind that one, but he's just like, if a man has to pay for a meal, the woman should pay for meals as well, kind of thing. Whether you agree with it or not, I guess it just kind of comes back to the idea of breaking the gender roles, and I guess kind of which ones need to be broken and which ones don't need to be broken. I don't know.
Wow, look at the time. Bradley, do you have anything else to say? I mean, because I know we kind of got into a really nice discussion about the whole thing, especially with the chat too. It's like, I mean, if you have anything else, feel free to bring it up now, since we kind of have a transition point.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to.
If you don't have anything, that's okay. We can just kind of carry on, see if the chat has any questions.
Yeah, right now I'm kind of, my brain's at a different aspect. I don't really have anything right now.
Well, if you guys have any questions,
I have something.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I have some, just little. It won't take us long to talk about, I don't think.
Are you sure?
But
I mean,
I'm sure it's a
when we say that, it usually ends up being like a 20-minute discussion.
True, but I'm sure it's something you've all seen recently, but I want to sort of briefly touch upon it, and that is the story of a girl that tweeted at American Airlines. And she tweeted, and this is her exact tweet to American Airlines. She said, "Hello, my name's Ibrahim and I'm from Afghanistan. I'm part of Al Qaeda, and on June 1st I'm gonna do something really big. Bye." Now, she is as common white girl as you can get. Just obviously, clearly no links to Al Qaeda whatsoever by sort of the Twitter page. Like, that's not going to give you any. Yeah, basically. And what American Airlines did is they took the girl's IP address and forwarded all her details to the FBI. And a day later, so this was on April 14th, she was arrested, and basically she was meticulously questioned, and basically she's going to end up going to court and everything under suspicion of being a part of Al Qaeda. And I just think it's this absolutely crazy story that sort of perfectly depicts that whole, thinking about your actions sort of thing. And it's honestly, I don't understand how you could be so stupid to do it in the first place. I mean, the last thing you should tweet an airline is that you're a terrorist, but
really though.
But
That's so dumb.
I just think it really is sort of an example to people not to be stupid, because you can tell this girl is not a terrorist. Like it's fairly obvious, but the airline just turned around and said,
We'll make an
"You've just
example
made
out
a
of you."
serious threat, and now you're going to get in trouble for it." And I just think it's a crazy story. And I just wanted to sort of see what you guys thought about the way you thought it was too extreme. Whether you think sort of, I guess punishment fits the lack of crime. Maybe it is a lack of crime. Maybe there's not really anything there. But
I think it's unfortunate for her, because I think you can definitely tell that with that, you know, it was a joke and it wasn't meant seriously. And it's unfortunate that she's gonna have to go through this, and if something comes of it, I'm sure, you know, everyone will know if it, you know, anyone who's job searching her will, you know, will see her name come up on a Google search.
She's like done for life.
yeah.
And it's incredibly unfortunate that this had to happen to her, and that, you know, they have to take these steps, but at the same time they have to do something to make sure that it doesn't keep happening. So you have to make an example out of somebody, and it just happened to be her.
It sucks. Yeah, it's really just the short end of the stick. I mean, there are plenty of people who, I'm sure, like I mean, just there are plenty of idiots on Twitter who think it's funny to tweet stuff out like that, and you know, it just so happens that this girl probably, you know, she just got screwed over. You know, wrong place at the wrong time, wrong tweet at the wrong airline.
Yeah, it's you gotta make the example somewhere, and unfortunately, it had to be her, and she's gonna have to live with it.
You know, sometimes I just don't understand how a human being could think that stupidly, but that's just me.
How that could be so funny.
like how logically in your head, it's like, oh yes, you know, I live in the United States of America, or no. Well, she didn't live. I don't even know. Is she? I guess she was Dutch. Well, basically, I think it's a smart idea to tweet at an American airline about being a terrorist, even as a joke. Like how does that logically make sense in someone's head?
Right. Like America of all places. With the social taboo, the unfortunate social taboo that we have about, you know, Islams and Muslims and the Middle East, and you like America of all places, you send that tweet.
I don't know. I mean, it's like, and you would write it on Twitter and like just.
Right.
I don't know.
Like somewhere that it's going to be retrieved. Like you can't. Yeah.
But then there's that whole group of people.
back.
There's like this whole group of people though. Party Rock. We can talk about that next podcast because I feel like we're gonna run out of time. But like I feel like it's like there's like this whole group of people who feel like 9/11 isn't a big deal. Like I don't know if you remember, there was this one thread on CODs like one year where someone was like, "Yeah, I don't think 9/11 is a big deal. Like, what do you guys think?" It's like, I was like, that's just like this is the worst way of phrasing. Like, you may have like an opinion on like the way we've handled it as a country, but it's like I don't understand why that wasn't a big deal. Like it's, I don't understand it. And obviously, like, I mean, people think the same way, and they think it's just something they can make fun of. But it was seriously like it wasn't just an attack on a U.S. building. It was an attack on the World Trade Center. You know, World Trade.
Right.
And it wasn't just an isolated incident. It affected everyone in the world.
It had more repercussions than just people dying.
Yeah, that's just like one of my big pet peeves, I guess. All right. Oh my God. Bradley, it was awesome having you on. Like it was really nice to be able to have, you know, our like standard ATP intellectual discussion, even though we've been up for like 30 hours straight. I mean, Kieran, you've been up for like 38 hours straight, haven't you?
38, yeah.
Yes.
This is it's been a mental day, that's for sure.
I'm sure. That sounds nice and fun. You guys need to get some sleep.
Yeah, it's. I mean, obviously, though, we're gonna wrap it up, and we're gonna thank everyone for you know, everything they've done. But you can stick around if you want, but now you can you know, say goodbye or whatever you want to do. You know, feel free to like link your Twitter or anything, you know, anything you want people people in the stream to check out?
Not too much. I've just got I have a 10-page essay due tomorrow night that I got to keep chugging away at.
Or start?
So pretty much.